I'm so excited about today's topic, but more excited about being here with the incredible award-winning actress who I have watched many over the years, who is a pro-age advocate, author. I mean, the list of your accomplishments, Glynis,
I don't know about
phenomenal. And you cover the broadest subjects, don't you? From
I
well-being,
do.
nutrition, beauty, personal development, growth. I mean, you name it, you cover it.
Yeah, I started Ageless by Glynis Barber probably about 12 years ago as a website to indulge my passion. Health has been a passion, and I know everybody's doing it now. But I've been, walking that path for many, many years, since the 1980s. It's just something I really believe in. And obviously, as you get older, it becomes more and more important. So I'm very pleased that I've continued to do it. But I talk a lot about mental health, stress. Our topic today is something I've actually done 2 videos on the Ageless YouTube channel. I think part of health is really looking after one's mental health. I think it's very, very important.
And it also, I think your mental health has an impact on your emotional health and your physical health and your general well-being.
Absolutely.
And also the health thing that I think, because I definitely switched it up in my 50s because I want to be healthy, I want to be fit, and I want to be strong in my 70s, my 80s and beyond, because, we are living longer. I just think physical health is so important.
And we're in uncharted territory now because people are living for so much longer. And, I've got so many friends who've got parents who are in their 90s. 80s actually seems quite young now. And, it's sort of navigating that. But, as we all know, everybody now is talking about the health span rather than the lifespan. And which was really my starting point, because I became very interested in health in my 20s. And it was about, I thought, well, if I'd like to live a long time, because, who wants to die? But I want that life to be healthy, because I don't want to suffer. And when I get to that stage, I just want to go quickly, really.
100%.
Yeah.
So today's topic is all about the self-critic, the negative talk, that negative rhetoric that we all have.
Yes.
And, telling it to shut the hell up.
Yes.
I was thinking about this quite a lot. And I was like, well, where does that negative rhetoric come from? Why is it so prevalent in women? And I was thinking about, it'd be interesting to get your thoughts on the role of perfectionism. Because if we aspire to be perfect, to live in a perfect world, you need to look at social media and Instagram, it's perfect lives. That is going to create a disparity between perfection and reality, and leave us feeling maybe insecure or not as confident. So our negative rhetoric, that self-talk, that self-criticism, is not being good enough.
I think perfectionism, which is exacerbated by social media and the pressures put on women, but I think it maybe comes from a very similar place to the inner critic. And as I said, I've done 2 videos. One was with hypnotherapist Zoe Clues, and it was a video called Silencing the Inner Critic. And what she said was that the inner critic, that critical voice that we all have, tends to come from some sort of trauma in our lives. And usually that trauma is in childhood. And when I say trauma, just as a child, if someone said, "Ooh, you're really fat," that is a form of trauma to a child, because it goes into their brain, they lose all their confidence, and it stays with them for the rest of their life. So that is a form of trauma. So when you hear that inner voice, it is an echo of what somebody has said to you at some point in your life. And that trauma can come later in life. But I would think most of it comes at the most impressionable stage of our life, when we are children. And it could be a critical parent. It could be that teacher who told you you would never amount to anything, you were no
We've all had
good.
that.
It could be a sibling, it could be a friend, it could be, you know, a relation of some kind. And I'm sure we've all had somebody like that in our lives, and it stays with us. And so when we hear that inner voice, it is an echo of something we've heard before.
But then the counter argument to that is, if it's an echo of something we've heard before, a positive, right? Because we also get positive affirmations, don't we? Whether it's from school or parents, etc. So why doesn't it sort of balance it out?
Because the negative ones wound us. And we remember the wounds. It's the wounds that traumatize us. Yeah. And of course, when we're children, we're so impressionable. We're forming ourselves. We may not have our sense of self-worth yet. And we're still forming who we are. And as children, we tend to believe what anybody says to us. So if somebody says you're not good enough, or in fact, you know, unless you're perfect and you do everything perfectly, you're not really lovable. And I think that happens more than people realize, where if you have a very demanding or critical parent, you can feel that unless you're doing something exactly how they want it or meeting their standards, you're somehow a disappointment or a failure. And I think a lot of perfectionism comes from that. It comes from a lack of a sense of self-worth. And then, of course, it's just so exacerbated by social media.
Yeah.
I have a friend in America called Aura Nadrich, who's a mindfulness author. She wrote a book called Says Who.
Oh, I love that.
And I love that title. So that is, you know, when you hear that voice, it's like, says who? Well, first of all, as she says, the voice is you. You have to recognize that voice is you, even if it's an echo of somebody else. And once you realize that and you have self-awareness, that gives you great power.
Yeah.
So I think as we get older, we actually have so much more power over that inner voice, which is great. Because I think when we're younger, we really are a victim of that voice and the voices that are maybe physically coming from other people. But, you know, as we get older through life and we have so much life experience and just to, you know, life is full of challenges for most people. I mean, not many people go through life or get to this sort of age without having tremendous challenges. And whether you're aware of it or not, those challenges give you incredible resilience.
Yeah.
And
the resilience translates into a confidence. But going back to that, you know, the sort of the negative self-rhetoric, and if you're in your teens, your 20s, your 30s, I've got 3 daughters, I think part of it is a level of self-awareness. Yes. Because I think we now are much more self-aware. And we hear that negative rhetoric, consciously take control of it, you know, use different ways to deal with it. So it's like, we're saying, so what? Says who? Yeah. So what? Says who? Yes. No, this is, or you know, my phrase is, you know, you can just shut the hell up. Exactly. You know where the door is. Yeah. But it's conscious, because I'm very much into personal development. And I wonder, when you're in your, you know, early teens and 20s, you know, young people don't have that level of awareness. And if you're not aware of the negative rhetoric, they can't hear it, they're not going to be able to overcome it. But going back to something you said as well, was there is this play on perfectionism. And I do wonder whether on a gender, women are more focused on being perfect. I think men don't have that issue so much, or don't have that issue at all. And then the second thing is tied into parents, because if you look at the influences in your childhood, the biggest influence is parental. Yes. And then you've got, you know, you've got teachers, etc. But parental is so important. And that one thing and once again, I don't know if it's nature or nurture or conditioning, but that concept of wanting approval from your parents. I have always wanted that. And I don't think they expected it. And they were very, very loving.
Yes.
But I still had that sense. And I can't work out whether that's something that all young children feel, wanting that approval from.
Well, I think you want approval from people you love, and you don't want, there's so many different things. I mean, I personally had a very critical mother. So I think I do, and I'm going to say use the word suffer from perfectionism, because my mother actually died when I was a teenager. So that sort of, in a way, locked me into the trajectory that I was on. But I always felt that I had to please her, because she was very critical, is that I had to be very perfect. And awareness is so important. And I still have it. I drive myself quite far, because I am aware of having this need to do things perfectly. But as I said, once you're aware of something and you know your pattern and you know why you're doing it, it gives you so much power. It doesn't mean that, it's solved.
The trigger's still
but
there.
It does make it so much more manageable. And, part of the journey is letting go of that. Not everything has to be perfect. And if it isn't, it doesn't mean that you're not likable or not lovable, which is, I think, what I felt as a child, that I was just such a failure and such a disappointment unless I delivered to an exceptionally high level, which has definitely affected me my whole life. But if you had the opposite...
But then I'm still a perfectionist. So through that,
isn't that interesting?
I am an absolute perfectionist. And I think maybe that's slightly different in terms of, for me, it's about doing a really good job.
Yeah.
It's doing a job well. And actually, my old business partner from my 20s, I was such a perfectionist. It was an absolute nightmare. And it can get in the way.
Yeah.
And it can get in the way of performance and delivery. And she used to have this phrase, which was, don't let perfect get in the way of good, right?
Yeah.
So something can be 99.9% and it's good. It's really high standard and it's good. So going back to that 100%, I can literally do, let's say, a piece of artwork, and it will be 99.999%. And I will probably spend 50 minutes moving 0.5 millimeter by 0.5 millimeter by 0.5 millimeter, because I want it to be perfect. And I'm very visual. So for me, that perfection is visual. That 0.1 of a, 0.10 of a millimeter, tenth of a millimeter, is not actually going to make that much difference. But it's how I see it.
There is no such thing as perfection. And I mean, it's very subjective. What could be perfect to you, somebody could say, well, that's just too conventional and put together. It would be perfect.
If it was imperfect.
If it was imperfect, or if it was a little bit undone. So, that is the other thing about the inner voice. What we've got to remember is that voice is somebody's opinion. An opinion is not fact. There's a difference. I always think there's a difference between truth and fact. So fact is, the world is round. The truth, if I said to somebody, I just think you're the most awful, toxic person, that may be my truth in that moment, but it doesn't make it a fact. Because, if we're living with, and I'm sure everybody's had somebody in their life say, you're not very nice, I don't want to be around you, or you're not good enough. But that is only somebody's opinion. It doesn't make it fact. And I just think truth is a very subjective thing.
The problem is with that, though, is if it's a critique or a criticism or somebody else's truth projected on you, we are very good at internalizing it, taking it very, very personally.
Yes.
So what happens is you're taking what is their truth, and then it becomes your truth.
If you let it.
If you let it.
So...
And maybe there is something valid. Let's just say, actually, Glynis, you really upset me. I thought it was really unkind and it wasn't very thoughtful, X, Y, Z. That might be...
Well, that's different.
That might be true.
That's different, because that's a discussion. That's constructive.
And you might go, you know what, hands up. I did,
Exactly.
and I'm really sorry, I should have been more thoughtful. But
Yes.
that doesn't mean it drives a negative belief about yourself.
But that's
Because
very
you might have been
yeah,
thoughtless in that one moment, but that
exactly.
doesn't mean you are a thoughtless person all of the time.
Exactly. If
Does that
somebody
make
says,
sense?
yes, entirely, because if somebody says to you, you know, that was really thoughtless and you really hurt my feelings and I didn't like the way you did that, that is talking about your actions. It's
Yeah.
not saying what you're like as a person.
Yes.
So what Aura says in her book, says who, she uses the release and replace method. So when that voice comes in, she asks herself 7 questions, and the first one is, says who? And usually it's yourself. And actually that gives you a lot of power, because you have the power to change what you're saying to yourself. And, you know, the second thing is, have I heard it before? Where did I hear it before? Oh, right. You know, that is what my parent used to say to me, or that's what my teacher said to me. So acknowledge that. And then you ask yourself, does what the voice is saying serve me?
Yeah, I've had that before.
Yeah. Does it serve me? Do I want it? And does it help me? And if the answer is no, get rid of it. Tell it to shut up. You know, replace it with its positive counterpoint. So does it serve, who is this my voice? Yes, it is. Does it reflect something somebody once said to me? Chances are yes. Does it serve me? Do I want it? Aura gives an analogy of something she does when she's working with people. She said, okay, write down this negative thing that the voice is saying, put on a piece of paper, crumple it up, throw it away, and then say, okay, do you want it? Do you want to pick up that piece of paper and put it back in your brain? Or would you like to keep it thrown away, which is just, you know, the physical manifestation of what she's saying, and then replace it with the positive counterpoint. And actually, so basically, you know, she's a mindfulness coach. So mindfulness, I think, is really, really important when we're dealing with the inner voice, because often we're lamenting the past, we're ruminating on the future, and obviously mindfulness is all about staying in the moment. And when we manage to stay in the moment, we are far less likely to have that inner critic and that inner voice, and to be much calmer and happier in the moment. And just all these little things we can do, they're just little things, but they add up, and it becomes a habit, you know. So when you just become aware of a thought, because, you know, we have tens of thousands of thoughts a day.
Yeah, exactly. So the mindfulness for me is that if you're mindful, therefore you are going to be more open and more aware. But what's interesting about the negative rhetoric is sometimes it translates not into you saying, actually, the negative rhetoric, it's like, let's say I was going for a job and it's like, well, you're not going to get that job, you're not good enough, you don't have the experience, there's lots of people, you didn't go to university. The thing is, you're not always aware, you can't always hear yourself, but sometimes in a lot of situations, it's an emotion, you respond emotionally. And you don't always hear that rhetoric, but you're responding emotionally.
You're absolutely right.
That side, I think, is more difficult to break down and deal with.
Well, behind every thought, there is an emotion. So ask yourself what you're feeling. Identify what that emotion is. You know, is it anxiety? I mean, as Aura says, most negative thoughts are fear-based. So what is that fear? What are you scared of? What is that emotion? And then talk to yourself, rather than the thought you've had, talk about the emotion behind the thought.
Sometimes it's the feeling, the emotion comes first, and then that mindfulness, that awareness is, why am I feeling anxious? It's great if you hear yourself going, oh, don't be so ridiculous, Grace, you're never going to get that job, you're never going to get XYZ.
Yes.
But it's not always as conscious as that.
I think the whole point is to make it conscious. And one of the great things about getting older and having so much life experience and having weathered so many challenges, and as I said, you know, whether you're aware of it or not, you become so much more resilient.
Yeah.
You have so many more tools to deal with that. As you say, you know, when you're a teenager or in your 20s, you don't always have that resilience, and it can be extremely painful. But this is something imagery I've used for myself. And then funnily enough, when I was talking to Zoe Clues, she actually mentioned it as a technique. So, you know, and it's for me, often when I'm, you know, and I've had bouts of anxiety. So I really looked into this and found a lot of tools, including mindfulness, to sort of deal with anxiety. And if I was lying in bed at night and I had a lot of mental chatter, I could identify, you know, we all have an inner child.
Yeah.
And
we all have
all
a parent as well.
We all have an inner child and an inner parent. Exactly. That's what I was about to say. And the inner child isn't as mature as we are. And it doesn't have the resilience, and it gets wounded more easily. And often that inner voice is actually that child has gone into a place of distress, or because, you know, that child, that inner child is locked into the time it's suffered that form of trauma, or it's suffered those unkind words that wounded it, or to whatever level. So if that inner child becomes distressed, it'll come out as this voice.
Yeah.
And so I always had this imagery. I you know, because I used to be called Glinny as a child, I say, oh, little Glinny, oh, are you feeling upset? And then I would mother, I would have an image of mothering little Glinny and saying it's okay. And then I would use my parental worldly skills to sort of put my arms around her and comfort her. And it's funny because Zoe in the video, which is, you know, Silencing Your Inner Critic, it's called, she mentions that as an actual technique that she advocates.
I've heard that before, and I really, really buy into that. And I've found myself before reacting, feeling, reacting, and almost being a 5-year-old. This is little Grace, this little, like, feeling really vulnerable or hurt or upset, but the emotion is like a 5-year-old.
Exactly.
It's so raw and it's so painful. And now a little bit I'm aware when I go into that childlike, and it's exactly the same thing. I sort of nurture that child because that child's hurt and is carrying pain. It's interesting.
Yeah,
and I liked your the sort of the physical side of that negative thought. If you catch it, I like the idea of writing it down and literally screwing up a piece of paper and throwing it away. I think there's the kinesthetic physical side of removing
it's like, I don't want that in my brain anymore. And also the other thing to say about the inner critic, it is you, it is your voice, and it is the meanest, nastiest voice you will ever have, and it's always lying.
Absolutely.
It's always telling a lie. And I mean, if anybody else, as a grown-up, spoke to us like that, we would not put up. If it was somebody on social media, we would block them. Yeah. And if anybody, if like a friend or at this stage of our life, anybody spoke to us like that, would we put up with it?
But we would. The thing is, that is so true, because I always say, if you went to a best friend and said, look, this is how I'm feeling, how would that best friend talk to you? We are our worst best friends. I mean, we do that to ourselves. We are so awful, damaging. And Brené Brown, who I absolutely love and I've listened to over the years, she sort of says all of the emotion, negative critic, all of it drills down into 2 base responses, like deep rooted beliefs responses. And one is, you are not good enough. And the other one is, well, who do you think you are? And I just think it's really interesting. And I sometimes use that quite a lot if I'm feeling a certain way, or I've got that negative rhetoric. And the other thing about negative rhetoric is you don't just have it, deal with it, and it goes. Like you say, it's wrapped around in fear or anxiety. It can stay with you for hours, sometimes over days. Yeah. So you're not going to overcome it that quickly. I then say, is this about not feeling good enough? Am I not good enough? Or is this about, well, who do you think you are?
Well,
And it helps just to contextualize it.
well, as I said, the moment you become aware of it, because when you're not aware of it and these voices just come in, they will sabotage you.
Absolutely.
They will sabotage you and you will become a victim. But, we're of an age now where we don't have to do that. So the moment you become aware that it's a voice, it's an inner critic, that it's mean, that it's lying, and you don't have to put up with it, it's a game changer. And
so true.
you really, really don't have to. And the thing is, we all have it. And as you say, I think it is more prevalent in women because I think there's more pressure on women to live up to things,
and
to be perfect,
the perfect housewife, the perfect mother, the perfect.
We still live in a very patriarchal society, and there is a lot more pressure put on women. So I do think, I'm sure men have it to a certain degree, but I think women have it a lot. But also be aware of the other side. Like for me, I have it. Absolutely, I have it. But I also have something else now.
Yeah.
I have the two different sides of me. And the other part of me is I absolutely now know who I am.
Yeah.
I know what I'm worth and I know what I'm capable of. And it's not like I'm saying that's great or anything, but I know that I'm not an idiot. Yeah. I know that I have capabilities. I know that I can work to a professional level. I know that I can deliver. So I know that. And of course, as we said before, social media has made everything worse. And of course, social media is full of people who don't know you, who have never actually met you and want to tell you, how awful you are, what a waste of space you are. I have to say, sometimes it will get to you, but I often now just laugh. Somebody can say something so spectacularly rude to me and I will actually burst out laughing because it's so
as opposed to burst out crying.
It's so ridiculous. And I do love blocking. I mean, if somebody is nasty and toxic, who needs them? I love that little block.
Totally agree.
That little block button.
The thing about, which is interesting, the perfectionism, like you say, the areas that you're strong and you're like confident in, you're skilled, you've built that skill, that experience, that expertise. But I think the other side of that is become a little bit more realistic, and we've accepted ourselves that we are not perfect, or you know what, I'm never going to be an astronaut. So that realism that you're not perfect, there's a whole list of things that I'm never going to be able to do, and if I did them I probably won't be very good. That's okay. It doesn't impact my self-belief, my worth, or my value. So I think realism is rolled into all of this conversation, because if you're more realistic, that negative rhetoric, that self-critic doesn't have the purchase to be able to compare and use as a benchmark against you. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And the other side is, I really believe, which I guess is part of what are the things you can do to overcome it. I really believe in affirmations, and I do a sort of morning meditation. It's a guided meditation, but it's around the affirmation. So it's positive affirmations. And I formed my own affirmation, because you can read them, you can find them, you can write them on the mirror and all this sort of stuff. But one of the ones that I did, and it was through a meditation, it's finding your affirmation that is right for you, that's relevant to you, that fits. So I was testing all these different words. It was brilliant. And now I've got it. It's 3 things. And it anchors and it just my everyday.
And we're all different. So, different things will work for all of us. I mean, one little thing that worked for me, because, I'm an actress, I've thrown myself into this world of like websites and making YouTube things. And, there are moments it's been terrifying. And then you realize and you think, well, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to do this. And then you doubt yourself. I can't do this. And then you realize one day, nobody knows what they're doing. We're all out there just trying to get through this, make it work. And you somehow envisage everybody else knows exactly what they're doing, how to do it, how to receive a fantastic result. And then when you realize, I don't think anybody knows what they're doing, it's actually such a relief. And some people hit lucky and some people don't, but we're all out there just doing what we can, doing our best. And you know what? I think the effort of trying something is everything. It's
Absolutely.
and if it doesn't work, it doesn't matter, but at least you made the effort. Because if you don't make the effort, you know, you can't gain unless you make the effort.
100%.
And you will always learn something, even if it doesn't work.
I totally agree with that. Making the effort, because part of this conversation is fear.
Yeah.
And fear is limiting, isn't
Very
it?
limiting.
It stops you. It's paralyzing. It stops you.
Yes.
If you don't want to, and I read a brilliant book in my 20s, I talk about it every time, which is Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway.
Yeah.
And that's about recognizing fear.
That's my line. I've used that line, yeah.
I absolutely love it. It's such a good book. But recognizing the role of fear, because it does have a role, and then how you overcome it. And one of the big parts of fear is to keep you safe, right?
Yeah.
If you step out of your comfort zone, you are exposed, you are vulnerable. You know, something bad might happen. I might be eaten. I won't be safe anymore. But life would be really limiting if you didn't step out of that comfort zone.
Yeah.
And the other one is trying something, which goes back to what you said, is that sort of fear of failure. Fear of failure then is driven by being perfect, and that you can't be perfect. You can't be successful in every single thing that you do. And you might fail, but you learn. You get so much more out of it, even if it hasn't quite worked out.
Do you know,
and that for me is how you build resilience. That is how you build real courage.
Yes. I mean, courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is having fear and doing it anyway.
Yeah.
And I have to say, at the time I started the website, and I wasn't very tech savvy, I'm still not actually, I was absolutely terrified. And it was a time of my life where I met somebody, asked me a question. Do you think fear holds you back? I went, no, of course not, never. But the question stayed with me, and it kept going on in my head, and I couldn't let go of it. And I came to this realization for the first time in my life, who am I kidding? Really? And I realized, and for the first time in my life, became aware of how fear had held me back. And even as an actress, actually had some amazing opportunities in my career that I actually turned down.
Did you?
Yeah. And I gave myself another reason. And at the time, I didn't think it was fear. I gave myself, oh no, I can't do that because of that.
And I
rationalized it. And then I had this huge realization about 12 years ago. Suddenly, it was like the wool had been taken off my eyes. I saw how much fear had held me back. And it was at that point, I was terrified to start a website. What am I going to talk about every week? I'll have nothing to say. I'll run out of things. People will laugh at me. I'm an idiot. I don't write. How am I going to write an article? I've never written an article in my life. And it was the first time in my life that I made a conscious decision to do it anyway. I thought, I'm scared. People may laugh at me, but I'm going to start this website. And I did it in terror. But I was so proud of myself because it was the first time I consciously worked through my fear and did it.
I wonder what was driving that fear, though. Was it a fear
a lack of self-worth?
Self-worth,
definitely,
and value.
A lack of self-worth. And I mean, I very clearly remember from the beginning of my career, like my feet hit the ground running, and huge opportunities were thrown at me, and I couldn't handle it. I actually now realize that I actually self-sabotaged a lot of my career in my 20s because I just was heading in one direction. And I remember now it was completely overwhelming to me. And I guess just at that time mentally, I was not ready for it. So I had to grow up a bit. I had to grow up and I had to experience, and I needed resilience. And, you know, listen, fame and a huge career isn't for everybody. And I don't think I could have handled it then.
I think success that comes early, I sometimes think about young people.
Yeah.
Especially in the arts, if they get fame in their 20s,
it's a lot to handle.
Catapulted. They don't necessarily have that robust mental ability. It must be really hard.
And I think it's even harder now because, you know, we're all so visible. You know, you
Yeah.
don't even have to be an actor or famous, and you're visible
Yeah. Yeah.
on social media. So, and we have now the new anxious generation, don't we?
Yeah.
Because the younger people now suffer from full scale anxiety. And funnily enough, I saw
Yeah.
something. Gwyneth Paltrow did a post
Mm.
about her children recently, who I say children, I think her boys mid-teens and her girls like 19 or something. She mentioned anxiety, and she mentioned this is the anxious generation.
Yeah. I think that's
And
probably true.
so that really is quite something. And it's not surprising when you think of it, because the
Mm.
exposure that everybody gets now is
Yeah. So
unbelievable.
visible.
Yeah. So we need that resilience, but we have it. We have it as we get older, and we have that sense of self-worth, and it's so important to remember it. So it just boils down to awareness. When we hear that voice, you can deal with it. You can deal with it. Just be aware of it, hear it, challenge it, question it, and then tell it to F off. Basically, that's
I'm
what
with
you
you
have
on
to
that
do.
one.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, we're coming to the end. I could talk to you all evening. I don't know if there's any questions or thoughts from anybody, questions that you'd like to ask Glynis.
If our brain remembers trauma to keep us safe, what keeps our resilience up?
Survival. Look, anybody who gets to their 40s, 50s, or 60s has got resilience, because it's the only way
We survive.
the only way we can survive. I mean, I've only recently, I feel like I have had a lot of challenges in my life, and I would say it's only, and I'm in my 60s, and it's only in recent years I have become aware of how much resilience
Really?
I have built up. I mean, it was there in my 40s, it was there in my 50s. I think it was there a lot stronger in my 30s, and I don't think I had a lot in my 20s. Knowledge will set you free. Awareness will set you free.
I do. I agree with that, because if I look back, every single one of us will have trauma, will have loss, will have devastation, will have sadness. I remember for so many years lived in fear of losing my parents, thinking I will never, ever get over it. I won't be able to deal with it. And I've now lost both my parents. And it was devastating. I can't begin to tell you how heartbroken and devastating it was. But I got through it. And I think resilience comes through those really painful experiences, and knowing that you get through it, you come out the other side. Doesn't take the pain away.
No.
And it's still there, but that thought, and I have a phrase, I always say, this too will pass.
Yes.
And
it will.
you know it will pass, because I've been through it and I've passed through it. And you come back, you do come back stronger. And that strength drives a resilience.
They say
And
what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Absolutely.
And it is true. And it will pass. And, obviously there are things that cause pain, and the pain will always be there, if you lose somebody or grief or something terrible happens, but it will lessen with time.
Absolutely.
And you do, even the most difficult situations that might be an ongoing situation, there will be a point where you're in the midst of the trauma, in the midst of the challenge, in the midst of the pain. But then even that will become a pattern, and you'll get used to it, and you'll find a way to survive in that situation, or to move on from that situation.
And sometimes I think as well is actually sitting in it.
Yeah.
So nobody likes pain or sadness, but now I sort of feel, if that's how I'm feeling, I almost embrace it, because if you embrace it and you're in it and you sit in it,
yes,
and it hurts, you're more likely to come through it than if you just pretend it's all fine, because you never really deal with it. And then once again, it's like, it's okay.
I mean, I think, and I'm guilty of this. I mean, I think a lot of us will do anything we can to avoid pain. If that means, I'll just have this bottle of wine, or I'll do this, or I'll do something to distract I'll distract myself, or I'll go work hard, or go scroll on Instagram, or watch whatever. But the thing is, you can't, because if there is something happening in your life, it will it will find you, and it'll
Yeah.
find you when you least expect it. So in a way, I think pain and grief have their purpose and they have their place. And it's almost put yourself in a safe space, give yourself time, and allow yourself to feel it. And I know it will be painful and it will be really hard, but by putting yourself there, you will acknowledge your pain, which will give you strength, and then it will be able to move forward. You can run, but you can't hide, because it will find you.
But also, if you're in it, only then you can start to break it down, deconstruct it, to be able to deal with it or to find a solution. Or if you run away from it, then you're not actually solving anything.
You're not
dealing with it, and you're not solving.
It makes it worse. And the thing is, I think it affects you, if there's a situation and you're just not dealing with it, or you're trying to avoid something or hide from it, it will come out in another way. And 100%. That way could even be ill health.
Yeah.
It could be ill health. It could be, mental health. It will come out somewhere.
Yeah.
So painful as it is, to just sit with it is actually a very healthy thing to do. To dwell in it and to sit there and refuse to come out of it is a whole other ballgame.
And that's a whole
other
studio life.
Exactly.
Or how to deal with problems and challenges.
Yes.
And not in those situations almost become paralyzed and a victim to it.
Yes.
Because I think, it's you want to be positive and you want to move out of it positively. So that's another studio life that we will talk about. Great, fantastic. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
I really, really enjoyed
Always a pleasure
that.
talking to you.
And we'll see you for episode 3.